I'm Austin here. Today we have the pleasure to have Kelly Meyer with us today. And did you go to college exactly at Loras?
I started here in the fall of 1981, and I graduated in 1985. So, a lot of my parents.
That's actually something that we see is a little more rare today.
Sure, sure.
Jumping in here right away with the first question. What was the most important thing that you remember the identity of Loras when you were there?
Well, I think I think there's probably I look at it two different ways. When I was there, and maybe what developed and what I see today. I think when I was there, I think the liberal arts component was important to me. I pretty sure I was going to be a broadcast major, but I wasn't 100% sure. So it was a good opportunity for me to try different things. The Catholic component, I think, is something that grew on me as a student here. Um, I used to go to mass at 9:30 on Sunday evenings. They had every other week they'd have a mass on in Binns or Beckman Hall, Berlin Formal. And my mother had a hard time believing that there actually was mass at 9:30. She just thought I was giving her a hard time. In fact, one time when Father Abbot Heeman, who was a former board of regent, unfortunately I was recently, I don't know, within the last year or two passed, I was in a bank and Father Abbot was there, and I brought my mom over to Father Abbot and said, "Can you verify that there is a mass at 9:30 on Sunday nights?" And he did that, and actually made my mother quite happy that I was attending mass on a regular basis. So, but that's something that I even did in freshman sophomore year. At the time, I don't know that I realized that was important to me, but it actually had more importance and greater importance to me as down the road as far as that's
I guess you mentioned the Catholic identity,
concerned.
and I guess how would you correlate that with being a teacher? Talk, just the
Well,
overall identity for students.
the thing that I thought was great here was, I think I was surprised because I don't know, when I came here, in my class, I came from a small farming community. There were 64 students in my class. 5 of us came to Loras that year, so that was a pretty high percentage. But it was the first. We were the first class to have students from my high school. It's only 60 miles away from here, so it's not that far away. Um, it was funny when I told people I was going to Loras, there was an assumption I was going to become a priest, and that wasn't even a false call. I mean, in fact, I had people say, "So you're going to be a priest?" And I didn't realize. I don't think so. But so I guess for me, I guess when I say the Catholic identity, in all candor, I don't know. I think that was a positive part, but I can't say at the time it was so important to me. As far as that's concerned. But I will say that it was good for me when I came to Loras. Coming from a small rural community, our parish, it was the last stop before the priest retired. Okay, and so it was interesting for me to actually see young priests. I mean, honestly, I'd never seen anyone that was younger than 65 or 70, and to have priests introduce themselves sometimes by their first name. I mean, that was like, oh my gosh, I don't know if we even knew priests' first name. In my, obviously we did, but as kids we didn't know even priests because you just called them by their father, Overman or Father Supple or whatever. Here, you might have a priest like Evheman come up and say, "Hi, I'm Evheman. Aren't you a priest?" I mean, so it gave you a little different perspective, and the masses were different. Again, you had priests obviously that were here to work with college age students, and they did a great job of identifying with students. So I think that's why, you say it kind of grew on me, but it wasn't one of those things that I probably looked at in coming here, or maybe I've come to value it more. I mean, I may not have valued it as much at the time, or I didn't realize, maybe is the way to say it. I didn't realize how much I maybe valued that, the community component of it. So that was important.
Switch gears, I guess, a little
Okay.
bit here. Now we're using, I guess, this laptop,
Sure.
laptop campus, of
Mhm.
course, today. What do you remember of the technology that is changing?
Well, here's a good example, and I date myself a little bit. I was a communications major and a journalism minor, so I had intro to reporting too. And we used to race to class to be among the first ones there to get the electric typewriters. Okay, there were no, I mean, there were no PCs. I mean, in that, I should say, there were no PCs in that lab. You know, what I mean, for mass media, the only computers were for the computer science folks. You know, so nobody had. I don't even recall students having computers. I don't recall laptops and things of that nature. You know, clearly the computer science department had computers, and you could use those. There was a computer lab, as I recall, over in Hennessy Hall, on the first floor of Hennessy Hall, and there was one in Ben's. But like I say, we raced to get the electric typewriters for reporting class. Otherwise, you had the manuals. You know, so that's been a huge difference. You know, I think the use of technology. I mean, in some fairness, just how technology obviously grown, regardless of what school you're looking at. But here at Loras specifically, with the laptop initiative, we were a long ways away from that, certainly when I was a student.
So I guess even using the electric typewriter, that helped you at all when you were getting out of Loras to have some exposure to technology?
Maybe a little bit, but not a lot, just to be honest with you.
Right.
But then again, I mean, in all honesty, that we were similar to everyone else. I can't say that I was felt behind in any way, shape, or form. You know, I was just where we were at. You know, I mean, it was fairly commonplace to be in that position. You know, I can't say that students who came or people who graduated from other schools were more proficient than we were, or we were at any kind of liability because that's just kind of, you know, at that time I graduated in 1985, was just really starting to usher in maybe a little bit of the age of the laptops and things of that nature. But I don't even remember, you know, honestly, I should, when I say I don't remember, I feel like I'm 80 here. I mean, but, uh, you know, back then, you know, there really wasn't even much, I don't know if you recall even laptops, you know, there were the desktops and what, the 386, which I mean, um, the 386 now, I think our cell phones probably have almost as much capability as those desktop, and they were expensive. You know, I mean, I was out of college and married for a few years before we got our first computer. You know, so I was just in that transition time. But I think it's great that Loras has done that. I think, you know, technology clearly, you have to be adept at technology. You don't have to be an MIS major, but not to be afraid of it. And I think that's the important component of what Loras is doing now with the laptop initiative. My son is a graduate of Loras. I have a daughter that's a junior here at Loras, so we have a pretty strong tradition. My wife is a Loras graduate. Um, I've got two nephews that are Loras graduates, niece is a Loras graduate. So, and they have all benefited from, you know, the technology and laptop environment. I think it's a wonderful thing to pursue.
Also, kind of looking back, you talked a little bit about the academic identity,
Mm-hmm.
and also kind of how that affected you. What were maybe the biggest programs you remember that Loras had? What really attracted students?
Well, you know, I think from a non-academic perspective, intramurals were huge, and Loras really, um, you know, I don't know that I get the sense that it. I think today intramurals are still big, but we prided ourselves. I actually worked in the admissions office as a student, as a tour guide, and we prided ourselves in the intramural program here, and where we had some national ranking. I can't remember. I want to say, you know, we ranked in some capacity as far as the highest percentage of our students in intramural athletics, and literally everyone participated in intramural athletics. I mean, not everyone, but pretty close. I mean, and I think it's still, but it really seemed to be, and maybe of course since I'm not on campus, I don't have a pulse on that, but it was a big thing. I mean, it was important to be involved in intramurals. I mean, you looked at how you were going to get a team together and that type of thing. And I think by doing that, the other positive is that you got a chance to meet more people. I mean, the community aspect of Loras, I think, is one of the things that I take away with and still value today. The people you meet. You know, I worked here for 9 years in admissions. I worked here for 16 years total in admissions and development. But in admissions, you know, one of the things that I think was a misnomer from students when I was working with admissions, sometimes they'd say, well, I'd like to go somewhere where I'm going to meet more people. And I would suggest to them, you're going to see more people. Okay. I'm going to suggest you're going to meet more people at Loras. And I did go, excuse me, for one semester to University of Northern Iowa. I have nothing bad to say about the university, but I truly believe that. So it isn't something where I just surmised, that I think that's the case. And even friends of mine who had maybe husbands or wives that went to larger schools, they often remark to their Loras husbands or wives, whatever the case is, how many friends we tend to have. And it's because you had an opportunity to not only just see people, but you meet them. And I think intramurals was part of that. You know what I mean? Sometimes people ask me if you have to keep in mind, Loras was around 2,000 students back then. So it's a little bigger than it is today, not significantly. And when it wasn't like you knew everybody, clearly. Like when people ask me, did you know so-and-so if they're from that area? And I said, I'm not sure. I don't recall that name. A lot of times I do, but not always. It wasn't like we all ate lunch together. I mean, there still was 2,000 people here. You know what I mean? But intramurals did help you get to know a lot of people. And so that was real positive. On the academic side, certainly, I think the sciences were very well known and respected here as far as that's concerned. So I think that was in. I was not a science major, but I think that's something that we all knew, and I certainly had a number of friends that went into pre-professional areas in medicine. Ones at Johns Hopkins today. I mean, they did not take a backseat to anybody as far as that's concerned when they looked at what they were going to do. I like the fact I came here. One of the things that was important to me was there was a radio station here on campus. I was a communication major, so I actually in high school did speech contests, and we actually had a contest over here at Loras, and that was probably one of the reasons I started thinking about Loras because, like I said, my high school there hadn't been anybody go to Loras for a number of years, and so I worked at the radio station. We had there was a wonderful opportunity to work with the local cable company. At that time, it was Westinghouse Cable, who had phenomenal facilities that we did TV production, so that was a real positive. So, I don't know that Loras was known for that, but that was very important to me when I came here. I also happened to play football, and that was not a big part of my decision, but Loras had just started back into football. It was only their second year in varsity football. They had dropped football for a number of years.
So that was actually a big thing here at Loras. I don't know the whole story, but basically it was out for no.
It was. Well, they dropped it in 1960, and then they decided that they wanted to go to, or they were hoping to go to well, they did go to a scholarship basketball program. When I was here, there was scholarship basketball players here. Baseball had some small scholarships, and basketball had scholarships. And that was Loras's envision to be like the University of Detroit, type of thing. They dropped football, varsity football in 1960. They started club football, and then in 1980, I believe that was the year, because I came in fall of '81. They went back to varsity athletics, varsity football. So, and we were actually NAIA at that time. Technically, we could have given scholarships, but we did not. I signed my national letter of intent, where most, on signing day, whenever that is, or whatever, for football. I think I signed mine in June. It was an after fact. It was an afterthought, and it was kind of funny. I took more grief because it was in the Cedar Rapids Gazette, and there was a little article, maybe about 6 inches at most, that had my name, another young man from my high school, and actually a guy I got to know from Iowa City who's now an orthopedic surgeon. And I got more grief from my friends. Said, "Wow, that was a big write-up on your football escapades." I mean, I don't know there was a sentence. I think they might have used two commas and let her go at that. So, but it was NAIA, but we were not in the Iowa Conference at that time. So the irony was when Loras technically dropped to Division III, and I don't think it was a drop; it was a positive because then we went to the Iowa Conference because the schools there weren't as many schools to play NAIA. We were traveling quite a bit, as far as that goes. I didn't play all 4 years here. I was fortunate enough to play right away, and I just made the decision that I was not an NFL prospect by any stretch of the imagination. and I was looking at becoming a broadcast major, and I just thought life was going to be a lot easier calling a game than playing in it. So I retired and then went. I started working with the cable company. We did games up here. We didn't do them all, but we did.
Did you still do some of the intramurals after
I
that
did.
point?
I did. Yeah, and that was fun. I really enjoyed intramurals. My personal preference was to have fun. And I thought that was a neat thing about the intramurals, here at the time, and it still may be the case, where they kind of, excuse me, put you at the level you wanted to be in. You kind of play for a few weeks. So the guys that want to take it serious, I mean, when I played varsity football, I took it serious, but, you know, I didn't feel the need to prove anything to anybody, so we had a lot of fun in our team. Some who took it more seriously, that was great. They didn't have to deal with characters like us, so it worked out good for everybody.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's awesome.
yeah, yeah.
Do you have any, I guess, big memories of traveling for intramurals? Here that you've had especially a large amount of fun with?
Well, I'll tell you, since you say that, and I'd forgotten about this, you just mentioned it, but they had a tug of war contest here,
Okay.
and Light Beer, the local beer, Miller Lite, local Miller distributor, put it on, and really, I can't even recall how our team got put together. I mean, it was just a random type thing, and we won it. We won it. Then UD came over. Clark did not at that time. I don't know if Clark. Clark was closer to being just an all-women's school. It wasn't, but or I don't recall that Clark was. But I do remember UD. Anyway, we won the contest. Well, we went to and we didn't realize this was going to happen either. By the way, we ended up going to Cedar Falls to the state pull-off, and we competed against schools from all over the state, and it was fun because they put us up in the hotels, and they had a big reception, and we ended up placing fourth. Iowa State United beat us, and we were the top private school, so we took a little pride in that. And what was our name? It was like Philo Sandine or something, which I don't even know what that was. It was some name. So what was funny, the only reason I remember that is because at Cedar Falls, when they announced our name, the one guy said, I don't know if I might be doing something I shouldn't. He was afraid it meant something bad or whatever. So it was some name, some old Western, some guy. Like I say, I didn't. And the only other thing that was kind of neat about it was Ben Davidson, who was a former NFL player, was a spokesperson for Miller Lite. And I'm dating myself here again, but Miller Lite commercials at that time were kind of the funny commercials. And he did a commercial with Rodney Dangerfield. And I'm dating myself even if you know who Rodney Dangerfield is, but he was a comedian, and so he did some commercials with him. And Ben Davidson is about 6'5", he's an Oakland Raider. And the thing I remember about him, he's a nice man, had handlebar mustache, whatever, nice man. But it was in the late spring, and he had shorts on, and his knees, from knee surgery playing pro football, I mean, it was just like a checkerboard. I mean, all the scars he had and stuff. So that was probably one of the neat things. We did it the next year. It was kind of a funny story. We did it the next year, and we won. We actually thought we're gonna take this seriously now. I mean,
We're gonna win twice.
yeah. So we won here, and Miller Lite dropped the state competition. So we got two. I got two T-shirts. So it was kind of funny. We had Father Charles Lang, who was a dean of students at that time. He happened to see me, and I had two T-shirts, and I don't remember really why we got two. To be honest with you, we had two T-shirts. So Father said to me, he said, "Well, Kelly, what are you getting with your extra T-shirts? I'll just probably give it to my roommate, whatever." And that was that long conversation. And I happened to go home that weekend, which was rare. And so when I came back to campus on that Monday, I said, "Hey, Kelly, will you be my friend?" You know. Well, Father, in the homily that weekend, I don't know how it all came about, but friendship came up, and he said, it's like a situation like Kelly Meyers. I talked to him, and he has two T-shirts, and he said, "I'm going to give one to my friend Kevin." So I took more grief about that around campus. Like, "Yeah, would you be my friend? I need a shirt. I need a shirt." And I'm like, I didn't see this one coming. So whatever, So Kevin got the shirt. I said, you talk to him. I got one shirt, So, but that was kind of the neat thing about Loras at that time. Getting to talk about communities, like getting in and just people knew. I mean, not everybody knew who I was, but probably a fair number of people. You knew of a lot of names. You know what I mean? And my roommate actually was an All-American football player, so they definitely knew who he was. And we knew Father Lang. He was the dean of students. He took care of discipline issues. So Kevin and I both knew Father Lang, unfortunately. So sometimes you meet some people that in different circumstances it maybe isn't the best, but it all works out. And Father Lang today, he still does some work in the development office, and still I see him on occasion. And we're good friends, but it all works out.
I guess one thing, because I don't think they have as many intramurals that people participate in. I mean, people still do have a lot,
Right?
But it's
right.
not, I don't think, the same level.
Right.
But there are a lot more, I think, clubs and potentially organizations.
Mm-hmm.
And one interesting thing that we kind of, I guess, noticed today is when someone sends out an email in Loras, a lot of times you'll get a list of 7, 8 different things that they're involved in.
Sure.
I was wondering if, I guess, you remember seeing anything like that at all during your experience here at Loras?
Yeah, I think there was some of that, but I think it's with my son was probably not as involved. He played football here, and so he was more on the athletic side. My daughter is a lot more involved in clubs and organizations, and my sense is there is a lot more clubs. There are a lot more clubs and organizations to get involved with here today than maybe when I was here. And then maybe in some fairness, I maybe didn't seek them out as much. Like I say, I really enjoyed intramurals. And like I said, that was something we kind of marketed. So, I really wasn't involved in clubs or as many. When I worked here, I had my nephew, who has graduated from here, went on some service trips. And honestly, I didn't have any desire to go on a service trip. Or I shouldn't say desire, I never really thought about it much. And so as an employee here, I went down to Kentucky for a couple times. I really enjoyed that. And, I wish I would have gotten more involved in college because I do know they had those. I mean, it wasn't totally new, but I really enjoyed that. I don't know that I got involved, but when I was on staff here, we did faculty staff play a couple of them. I had never done anything in theater, and some may suggest even if you're in those plays, I still haven't. But they were fun. And again, I had a roommate. I have to admit, and I'm not proud of it. I didn't go to many of the plays. I had a roommate that was in a play once. I think I went to watch it just because he was my roommate. That was freshman year, and I don't know if I went to any other plays as a student. And that's too bad. I did go quite often when I worked here, and I thought they were wonderful. And so I wished I would have taken advantage of that. And I don't know. Honestly, at that time, I don't know how different I was from the typical student. I mean, obviously, people did go to plays. Obviously, people did go to service trips. Don't get me wrong. My sense, though, is even fine arts types of things like music is bigger today than what it was. Our programs weren't very big. In fact, when you look at football, I'll be honest with you, we had our homecoming, a pep rally, and I came, like say, from a real small high school, but homecoming was big. I mean, small farming community, but the gym was packed. We had a pep rally. We had a pep rally here, and 30 students there. I miss my guess. The two MCs were intoxicated. And I have to say, I'm thinking to myself, I'm getting beat up every day of the week for this. What I had to say it was a little disheartening. I walked away from the pepper instead of being fired up. I'm like, does anybody really care? At least they did on a Friday afternoon. But they were a lot. Were right down the street here. Um, there were some places. The Avenue Top. I don't know if it was just called the Ave. Was actually there's a car wash there now, which some Loras alumni still have depression issues over. The Avenue was they had like quarter draws, or they call them progressives, where they start out at 10 cents a draw, and then they go to 15 or whatever. So, and the drinking age was 19 back then. Okay, so it was different. It was 18 in Wisconsin and 19 here. So, I do think that was, I'm not trying to suggest drink was a huge part of the culture here, but from a socialization standpoint, a lot of people could just walk down. You had the avenue, you had Gomer's, which now is I think to make me tan or something. You had what was the Barrel Tap, which is still there. It's not the Barrel. I always forget the name. So, but I mean, there were 4 or 5, and I'm not trying to overemphasize that part, but and then the Walnut. I mean, you had a lot of areas within walking distance. You had 3/4 of the population of age, and so I think sometimes you might have defaulted to that and maybe get more involved in some of the clubs and organizations, or at least that was I have to say for me. Um, so I think it's moved in the right direction, especially with drinking ages changing and things like that. It's more important to have stuff there on campus. Where I guess ultimately what I'm saying in a very long way, unfortunately, is the campus didn't have to be as inclusive as I think it needs to be now because there were some socialization opportunities outside of campus.
It sounds like actually in a lot of ways that even though there's the drinking going on, that it actually was useful from that experience standpoint just to go out and
Yeah.
be with other people.
Yeah. Well, I have to tell you, when I was an admissions counselor, and you might want to edit this one out, but we talked about our percentage, and at the time I knew what it was of intramurals, but we also talked about if parents were not along on the tour, we talked to students and tell them that we were ranked in Playboy magazine as one of the top 20 party schools in the country. So, for some of the people that resonated rather well, and going to put them over the top. There were certainly some people. That wasn't a positive. You kind of got a sense of where somebody was at before you threw that stat out. Like I say, you clearly didn't throw it out when the parents were on the tour. So and I do think, that was a fairly significant part of the culture here. As far as, and I think a little bit of that is a sign of the times with the drinking age and something. There was a pub right here on campus, which there is still now, but it was really a pub. It had a bar, a long bar in it, that type of thing. Um, it, with my freshman year here, it got closed down because some two guys, well, some guys kind of broke up the bathroom, and everybody on campus knew who did it, basically. But the idea there was until someone fessed up, it was going to remain closed. No one ever fessed up, and the pub never became a real focal point like it was before that happened. It was really kind of a place where people would meet here on campus. Once people kind of got used to going off campus, I'm not saying they stayed off campus.
Another question is kind of the controversy that might have happened either while you're a student here at Loras, maybe in your experience later. What would be the biggest thing that happened
As far as controversy,
within Loras or even maybe just the area?
we were again kind of a mellow group. we weren't terribly activists, I don't think. I mean, as long as the avenue was open, life wasn't bad. So as students, I don't really recall anything that was a lightning rod. I do know as an employee here, and I don't think it was. Well, I take that there are two now that I think about it. One of the lightning, it wasn't so much for the college, but the community is, we had, there were some unfortunate issues, in Dubuque itself, got some unfortunate, publicity on, there were some cross burnings here when I was working here. And, those things, obviously are not acceptable clearly. But I think what happened was we did have some students who were really wondering, regardless of what race they were, what kind of community is this? And it was a kind of a time where we as a college had to come out and just share, that yeah, these things unfortunately happen. We were hopeful that someone who lived here felt that was a minority of people. There was actually two men that were doing it and convicted. We had a mayor here at the time that wasn't terribly eloquent, in my opinion, in handling the situation. So I think it was an unfortunate time for the community. It was unfortunate because those things happened. Um, and so we had to kind of talk to students and maybe hopefully reassure them, especially if they're students of color, to say, we feel this, you'll be safe here, comfortable here. Well, I don't know if you could say comfortable, but safe, you know. So that was a difficult time. And I do remember, you know, at a college fair, I had a student walk by and say, I wouldn't go to Loras because Duke is racist. And, you know, that was hard to hear, and I understood it. I understood it. But there are a lot of good people too, you know, and it does show that the actions of a few can tarnish, you know, the actions of many, you know. So that was something that, you know, was unfortunate in every aspect. The fact that it even happened was unfortunate. Follow up, you know, those types of things, you know. So that was something I think more, and students did get involved with that a little bit, but you know, I was working here at the time. The other thing, and I almost forgot, is, and again, I was working here, was the consolidation part of now. And, you know, that was a challenging time just because we were all called into an all faculty staff meeting and no one had a clue. Senior Varda, who was the president at the time, I can't recall if he was acting president or president, basically announced that we would be consolidating. You couldn't say merge or anything like that, but consolidating with Clark. And I mean, literally, you could hear a pin drop in there. In fact, a few people got up and left. They were so upset. Um, and so it was a real difficult, it was a challenging time. I shouldn't say difficult, challenging time because the way the thing was set up was um, we were basically saying we were going to consolidate or, and efforts, and then but we're going to figure out how we do it. Which in my mind, honestly, was backwards. I thought maybe you take a look at is it feasible to consolidate and then make the decision. Ultimately, it didn't happen, obviously. You know, as far as that goes, because um, you know, once they started looking at the details of it, it just didn't make. It didn't seem to be as feasible. Let's put it that way. You know, I worked in the admissions office, and I think you know one of the things that people looked at is we have two Catholic colleges in does that make sense? And I think there was a misconception by some of the folks that weren't as intimately involved with either college at the time, was that there was a large cross app. You know, what I mean, they were thinking duplication of services and efforts. And certainly, I think there were some opportunities with the consolidation. You know, clearly there could have been, but we didn't cross app a lot. Loras and Clark, you know, obviously there's if you talk to older alumni, there were a lot of Loras Clark marriages. You know, because when Loras was an all men's, Clark was an all women's. But you know, we had been employed for a number of years, and there really weren't that many. I mean, I guess my point, there weren't a lot of students looking at Clark and Loras. That was their fight, you know what I mean? And so I think the premise may not have been 100% accurate, you know. So uh, sometimes it may not have happened for the wrong reason, maybe because sometimes emotion got a role in it, and emotion isn't always the best indicator if something's right or wrong, you know what I mean? But I do think I think it was a situation in all candor where I'm not so sure either college wanted it, if they'd be honest. You know, I mean, but everybody said, well, we've got to do it. And, you know, at that time, the Archbishop basically said, this is going to happen. And so that was, you know, that was a, you know, it might have been a year or so that we dealt with that. And then ultimately came out and said that, you know,
So I guess going back to the racism thing,
Mhm.
some of the thinking about, did you notice a difference in kind of the demeanor of students from the 80s into maybe the early 90s?
You know, I do think my sense is today that the Loras, has moved forward in that area since when I was here in school. Uh, Honestly, when I was here, there was not a lot of diversity, and I know there still isn't. You know, on a cumulative perspective, it's still not. But to be honest with you, when I was here, um, there literally was a handful of individuals that I would say, and I think the other, I don't, I don't know if it's good or bad, but they tend to be athletes, so there's another stereotype you have there with that. I happen to, I happen to off campus happen to be African American, and I do know, so I mean, I have some sense. There were challenges there, and I think when I became director of admissions here, one of the things that I said was, we want to increase our diversity. I mean, I think everybody understands that, but we have to be very sensitive. Of we're asking anyone to come into this environment, and I don't think it was a bad environment as far as hostility or anything like that. But just the fact is, um, you know, there aren't any other color here, and you need to understand that. And you have a comfort level with that. There's not a lot of diversity within the community. There's not a lot of diversity in our state. I mean, so if you look at the next circles out, I think it's incumbent on us to be very honest and forthright with people. And I had a lot of respect for anyone who would choose to come into this environment because if the tables were turned, I don't know if I would have that same kind of courage to do that. And when I say that, I hope I'm not painting the picture this was a bad place to be because I think there's some great people here. But I think it's just, I know like my roommate, and again, this is something I wouldn't understand, but just getting a haircut was a little bit different, just finding a place here in town to get a haircut. I guess I didn't think that, because there wasn't an issue with me getting my haircut anywhere here. You know what I mean?
Right.
So those are things that it helped open my eyes a little bit. You can look at things from a global picture, but there are some details, that you got to understand too. So I do think we've made progress there. I think there's always progress to continue to be made. I think, I hope that Loras has always been a welcoming community. But I can appreciate and like I say respect anyone who's made the decision to come here when the percentages are heavily skewed towards a community that isn't terribly diversified.
Another kind of question that we Loras and then Clark is Clark had like a higher while you're here.
Right.
How did that change the interactions with students and the campuses?
You know, we really did not have a lot of interaction with the Clark students. And that was, I think, another misperception by those who made the decision to consolidate. At that time, there was a tri-college effort. And Morris Clark, and you could take a class at any of the three schools. I think you still can, but it's not the tri-college. I know that.
You can sign up.
You can
It's
sign
a lot more
Yeah.
difficult to actually do.
I mean, there was actually an old white bus that pulled in front of Kane Hall that would take, I mean, the classes were scheduled as such that you could take a class at any of the three. And when you registered, actually, you saw the classes at the other two. Education, it's still, well, maybe not now, but was the longest tri-college effort. So if you were an elementary ed major, you took the majority of classes at Clark. If you're special education, you took the majority of classes at UD, and then secondary was here. But outside of homecoming, honestly, there was not a lot of interaction. I mean, from a college perspective, I mean, you would see our top students here because you could easily ride the bus, that type of thing. But, when I was here in 81, I think Clark went co-ed in 78, if I'm not mistaken, right? It was 77, 78. And they've had, again, obviously, they're heavily more. Um, there wasn't really a lot of interaction. college to college, you know. So that was one of the things that was kind of confounding when they said, let's consolidate you. Like, you know, if you said, you know, we're doing everything the same and what have you, that makes all the sense in the world, but there really wasn't a large, uh, you know, a strong relationship in a sense. You know, I know just from my admissions days, historically, all men's schools have had an easier transition. Uh, Becoming more closely diversified as far as women than all women's schools have. And I think that still holds true today. You know, when I worked here in admissions, we were close to 50-50. I don't know, is it slightly more women now
I
than
believe
that?
it's
Yeah, I think it might be where, and I know Clark's made some inroads in getting, you know, closer to diversity, but I think they still have a higher, you know, population. So, you know, outside of the tri-college efforts where you could go, you know, that bus eventually became a van, honestly, and then the van went away, you know, and then
Right.
Loras kind of, I think Loras kind of initiated, and I don't know all the details, but I think what happened was because we were a little bit larger than the other two, especially at that time, it didn't seem that the tri-college effort was as beneficial. Maybe the Loras, we didn't have as many students taking classes in Clark and ED as you. I don't know all the details as to why. I think I don't know, social work used to be tri-college, but
I don't actually think it is now.
it
Like
may
I was
not
so
be.
soon
Yeah.
How would you say that your experience here at Loras either did or didn't help you? I guess the rest.
Well, I think Loras helped me a lot. You know, when I came to school here, um, I came from a farming community, and I there weren't a lot of guys. I was just on the fringe of a time where you could walk right into farming, or maybe walk into some manufacturing jobs and things of that nature. Those jobs are starting to go away a little bit more. Farming was becoming more expensive. I guess my point is that um, I went to college, but I wasn't sure that was what I should do or not. You know, but it was kind of the best of all options. I mean, it was hard to get a job. I wasn't going to go in the military, so I guess college is pretty much it. When I got here, I just found a real welcoming community that really helped. You know, my faculty was here. Yeah, one of the stories I think of, and I tell every once in a while, and more than people want to hear, but is my first. It was kind of funny. My first class was Intro to Biology, 8 o'clock, and the professor said, you know, going through the roll call and just the Myers, and two of us here. Okay? Terribly uncommon name. So he goes, Myers, Kelly, here. I don't know what's up. There were two Kelly Myerses in this class. Well, what was kind of ironic was, and hers was M-E-Y, mine's M-Y. Her middle name was Jean and mine was Dean. So you talk about how close is that, you know what I mean? But the other thing about that class was, and I'm going to indict myself here, but it gives you, in my mind, it really gives you a sense of what Loras can do for folks. Is at midterm, I was, let's just say, was not excelling academically here, and in particular in this biology class. And so I walked into the class. Jack Mamrick, who I just have so much respect for, was a longtime faculty member here. Uh, I said, Doc, I had it was a 4 card class. I said, I got to drop the class. I'm flunking it. And I said, Doc, I got to drop the class. I'm flunking it at midterms. And I said, I'm not here to complain. And he says, well, Kelly, he says, you don't come to class very often. I said, you're right, Doc. I said, I'm not arguing. I deserve the out. I mean, he says, well, listen. He says, you start coming to class, and these things have a way of working themselves out. I got enough. He said, Kelly, now listen to me. You start coming to class, and these things have a way of working themselves out. I'm like, okay. So I did start coming to class, and I got a C in the class, which to this day may have been a gift by Jack Bamrick. But what impressed me was, I mentioned earlier how strong our science programs were. Jack Bamrick really did not need to take any time on me. I was not a science major. Frankly, it was just could have been one less paper, bad paper you had to create. You know what I mean? But that kind of set the tone for, he cared about some young freshman that really wasn't going to benefit him. You know what I mean? He wasn't a science major, whatever. But he took the time to offer some, at that time, much needed guidance. And so that's what I found here at Loras. I actually started here and then I transferred for a semester to the University of Northern Iowa. I came back and I kind of attribute that move to why I have such a strong affinity to Loras. And the reason I did, and the detail was that my father passed away when I was young, and so I had some Social Security benefits, and they kept decreasing. So I thought, you and I was real close. I liked Loras, but I'll just go there save some money. And I went there for a semester, and probably the first day, two things happened to me there. And I'm not here to speak for it about University of Northern Iowa, but two things happened. One is I went, and I lost my schedule. So I went to ask, could I get a new schedule? And the lady said, "What's your student ID number?" There's a moron that lost his schedule. I don't even know my student ID number. She looked at us, she was real, "What's your name?" She was real huffy about it. She said, "All right, that's fine. But after this, you need to know your student ID number." Well, here it's just Kelly Meyers. I wasn't a student ID number, and I was used to that. The second was the first classes, 8 o'clock class, and the professor said, "We're going to take a break." I've got a 9 o'clock class, so this is a 2-hour class. I'd gone through the registration process, and I was signed up, I hadn't invited to sign up on the schedule. So I lived in dropping it. I had a hard time being a full-time student that semester, you and I, because the classes were full. Again, I think there's some people here that would take the time to make sure that. So I credit that to why I have such a strong affinity to Loras. My daughter started out at Creighton. My daughter basically, my son kind of grew up here. Like I said, I worked here for 16 years. And my son started at Loras, graduated, and my daughter started Creighton. I think she just thought, try something different, which we supported. She came back here and absolutely loves it. I think, I kind of reflect back to my experience that I don't know how she'd have liked it or not liked it if she just started. We'll never know that. But I think the fact that, and again, Creighton's a great school, but the opportunity she's had here because people care. Like when she came back, she was manager of the women's basketball team. Came back at the semester, and she's always loved Loras women's basketball. With a coach, she said, "Coach, can I get involved in some capacity?" He said, "Absolutely." You know what I mean? We want you part of the team. I mean, that's part of what is strong about Loras. As far as something like that. Yeah, we'll let you do that. She came back and she really, I was surprised how intimidated she was as far as not knowing students, because having background here, most transfer students, if any, get a chance to take a J turn. Her advisor was, unfortunately, Karen. I know Karen well. I knew Karen at this college. Karen worked, so I think there's an opportunity here. So she got her in a J turn class, which really made my daughter feel more comfortable getting to know people right away. Those are the things that I think help set Loras apart. Is you have some people that are willing to go the extra mile for you here, or in my case, offer some guidance where some guidance was needed. As far as that's concerned. And I had other examples of professors that went out of their way. We had one professor here, Dick Clark, Doc Clark. Everyone called him Doc Clark, and I should have known something was up when I registered for classes. I came back up to the admissions office. I knew the admissions reps pretty well as a student. They looked at my calendar or schedule. They go, "Oh, you got a Doc Clark class," and the next week, "Oh, you got a Doc Clark class." Oh, what's up with this? He's a political science. Well, once I met Doc Clark when he came in the room, I understood now why he would say, "Oh, you got a Doc Clark class." Well, Doc and I ended up becoming very good friends. I wasn't a political science major, but one time he said to me, he goes, and like he'd yell things like when I walk in the field house, hey, Myers, drop that. Or his other biggest line was, Myers, good thing you're here because if you weren't, I'd be the ugliest guy on this campus. I mean, that's the guy, okay? The one time I see him, and this is in the pub, and he just walks in, he says, Myers, he says, you're a bright young man, but he says, you're never going to amount to nothing unless you change your ways. He says, you're a playboy. You're a big playboy. And I said, thanks, Doc. And I just kept walking. Well, at the time I was half torqued and half like, well, he does care though, seriously. I mean, he that was his. Now others might have done it in a little different way, than what he chose to do it, but it was equally effective, and it did kind of make me think, all right, the old line from Animal House, fat, dumb, and lazy is no way to go through life, son. Yeah, maybe I should look into that too, So, but again, political science professor, the political science major, but he did care. Like I say, others would do it in a different way, but he did care, and so that's what I took away from Loras, and even after I've left, I still there aren't a lot of faculty that I had. In fact, there's very few faculty that I had, but I still use those Loras connections, and I think they are lifelong. And that's the thing. With my kids going here, I've kind of reliving my youth a little bit. Like my son played football here, and his friends from the Chicago kids to the small town Iowa, and even like my wife and I have almost coined. There's little Rouse there. The guy I talked to, I gave the shirt to. I mean, some of those same kind of relationships, and they're just great relationships, and I think you can pick them up. When I look at my friends, from attorneys to social workers to physicians, you still can pick up the phone and call them, and maybe I've talked to them in a year or two, pick up right where it's left off. And I know other universities have that, but I just think like at Loras, you get to meet so many more people, get to know so many more people. Not only students, but even faculty and staff. Like Doc Clark had no children, and so when I worked here, I called him my third child. I mean, I'd take him to lunch, or he'd call and say, Myers, I need to go to the doctor. Can you give me a ride? And the secretary in our office would say, your son, Doc Clark, was in. He needs a ride. All right, where we got to go? I'll never forget one day I took him to a funeral, and Doc actually was going to be a priest, at one time, and obviously that didn't happen. Very religious, and he was a very bright guy. So I took him to a wake, and I said, "Well, Doc, who died?" He says, I don't really know the guy's name, but I just saw him in mass and just thought I should come. All right, Doc, and I got him up. So that getting older is like you go start going to wakes of people you don't even know their names. I don't know, what I mean? But that was him. But and I'm sure today, but we had some. That was the other neat thing about Lawrence. We had guys like Doc Clark, and now there was somebody that didn't care for me. By the way, he, like I said, he would tell you what he thought, but he had more people that did care. I mean, there's a scholarship in his name today. We had a Father Most. They called him Ducky. He was at the time considered one of the foremost knowledgeable people on the Virgin Mary. He'd written books and stuff, and he had some classes, and he was just known as just a unique human being. If you took a Ducky class, people would talk about Ducky. Father Most he thought about the flutters or the buggies. You student get those flutters in the springtime. And that's what's out there. Romance is out there. So but you had people like that. And I suspect you have them here, but you had a lot of faculty who've been here a long time, and that was good in many cases. Bad maybe some, honestly, but you had some folks. There was some certain stability in faculty, and you had some characters too, and that was kind of most of the time. That was I thought a positive. You didn't have a lot of turnover. Faculty just coming here to get a little background or to move someplace else. I think he had some people that truly wanted to be here, and I think that showed with their interactions. But even outside, like Jack Bamrick, when I started working here, they used to have a thing called Dionysia. I don't know if they still do that. It's in the spring.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I think they do.
It used to be a big.
I looked through some of the yearbooks, and there's just pictures and
Oh,
pictures and pictures.
it was big. don't think it's, I know it's not as big. I mean, they used to put, well, this, where we're sitting today used to be a big open area. It used to be called King Field. There's a lot of intramurals that happen here. But they put up a big tent. There's sometimes be bands, you know, what have you, play softball, like in the morning. And you know, Doc Bamrick, GB Noon was a long time resident. I mean, they'd be on our teams. You know what I mean? We'd play at 8 o'clock in the morning. We'd meet someplace for breakfast or 7 or 7:30. And you'd be working with faculty that are, in that, I don't think they were retired then, maybe close 60, 65, and you were having a few cocktails and breakfast. And it was kind of neat. You know, you could do that here and have fun.
Awesome. That pretty much sums up most of the things that I was looking for at the Loras
Okay.
experience. I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to know.
No, I don't think so. I think Loras is, you know, one of the things that I will say that's exciting to me now is to see some of the changes, you know, this building, Norman Campus Center, the Athletic Wellness Center. You know, when I was here, you know, there was kind of a long time where the campus really wasn't updated, you know, over a number of years, and it's good to see. I mean, the college is more than the bricks and mortar, clearly, but you know, in today's environment with students, it's important to have good facilities, and I'm excited to see that we're continuing looking at opportunities to upgrade campus. I think campus is a beautiful campus, but you know, it's a lot of our buildings are older, and we're addressing those things hopefully slowly but surely. Excited about the future of Loras, and hopefully we're around for years to come. Principal thinkers, right? Of course, that's the old tagline. I know that was 5, 6, or 7 taglines ago, but I gave myself there. That's it for me.
Well, thank you, Kelly Meyers.
Thank you. Thank you. Nice to meet you. So, all righty.